For most of Earth's history, life was silent, unthinking. But then, something impossible happened. A creature appeared that could imagine a world that didn't yet exist. We became aware, not just of the world, but of ourselves. That spark lit the fires of art, myth, and science, and gave us the power to shape the future. This is the story of how consciousness evolved, and why the journey is far from over.
Welcome to the Lantern's Glow. Today we're going to be exploring humanity's journey. We're going to be looking at our shared history and also, our potential. Yeah. And some of the big themes that we're going to be grappling with are these ideas of interconnectedness and collective responsibility.
Big themes for sure.
Yeah, big stuff. So we're going to be looking at Hegel's phenomenology of spirit.
Okay.
We're going to be exploring some excerpts from The Origin of Consciousness, the breakdown of the bicameral mind.
Oh, that's a fun one.
Yeah. And then we'll also be considering philosophical and scientific perspectives on human nature.
I think it's going to be a really interesting mix, and hopefully, everyone listening by the end of this Lantern's Glow will walk away with like a richer understanding of where we've been as humans and then, kind of where we might be headed.
Where we're going. Yeah.
The big picture.
The big picture. Okay, so let's start with Hegel. Now, I'm going to be honest, his phenomenology of spirit, it's known for being a bit of a brain twister.
It's true. It's dense.
Dense is a good word for it. Okay, so for someone who's never even, cracked open Hegel, what's the big takeaway? What was he all about?
Well, I think, simplifying it as much as possible, Hegel was obsessed with how we come to know things. Like, he didn't think that there was some hidden truth just waiting out there to be discovered, but instead, he was really fascinated by the journey of understanding itself.
The process.
The process, yeah. And for him, true knowledge was less about the what and more about the how, the process of learning and evolving. And he believed that that process of coming to understand things is very much shaped by history and by our collected experience.
Okay. So, how does this idea of the process of knowledge, how does that tie into his idea of Geist? Because I know that's another big concept for him, and it sounds kind of mystical, when you hear it.
Yeah, Geist is often translated as spirit, but I think it's helpful to think of it more like the collective consciousness of humanity. The evolving spirit of the times. Hegel saw Geist as constantly changing and shifting throughout history. It's kind of like we're all part of this giant unfolding story.
So instead of focusing on individual moments of understanding, he was looking at the bigger picture of how humanity's understanding has evolved over time.
Exactly. And he believed that in the present moment, we have this unique opportunity to grasp our own self-awareness, our place in this grand narrative in a way that wasn't possible for the people who came before us.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So we've got this big idea of Geist, this evolving spirit of the times.
Yeah, that's driving everything.
It's driving everything, okay? Now, let's break down some of the key Hegelian concepts that might be helpful for our listeners to understand. You mentioned in itself versus for itself earlier. What does that even mean?
Great question. Think of it like this. Imagine a seed. That seed has everything it needs to become a tree, right? That's its in itself state.
Okay.
It has potential, but hasn't realized it yet. But it only becomes a tree for itself when it actually grows, interacts with the world, and fulfills that potential.
So in itself is raw potential, and for itself is when that potential is actualized.
Exactly. And this doesn't just apply to trees, it applies to people, ideas, and even historical movements.
Give me an example with people.
Sure. Imagine someone who has a natural talent for music. That talent is there in itself state. It exists, but if they never practice, never perform, never develop it, it stays hidden.
Right.
But if they put in the work, refine their skills, and actually become a musician, they've moved into their for itself state. They realize their potential through action.
So this is basically a framework for growth, from potential to reality?
Yes. And Hegel thought that this isn't just a personal thing. Societies and even humanity itself are constantly on this journey from in itself to for itself, striving to become aware of what they could be.
Okay, I can see that. And that ties into history, right? Like movements that start as in itself and then become for itself when people recognize their power.
Exactly. Take the civil rights movement. Before it became an organized force, African Americans already had the right to equality in principle, but not in practice. They were an oppressed group in itself. It was only through struggle, activism, and collective awareness that they became a movement for itself, demanding recognition.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is. And this connects to another big Hegelian idea, the master-slave dialectic.
That sounds intense.
It is, but it's also fascinating. Hegel argued that power isn't just about one side controlling the other, it's about recognition. The master needs the slave to confirm their authority. But here's the twist. Through their labor, the slave is actually shaping the world, becoming more self-aware, and ultimately the one driving historical change.
So the master thinks they're in control, but the slave is actually the one gaining deeper self-understanding through struggle?
Bingo. And we can still see versions of this today. Think about workers and employers. A company relies on workers to function, but workers, through collective action, can change the system. Or think about consumers and corporations. Our attention and spending shape markets, even though corporations act like they're in control.
So Hegel is basically telling us to look at power structures critically, because the roles we play aren't always what they seem.
Yes. And that's why in itself versus for itself is such a big deal. It's not just about individual growth, but about how people, societies, and history evolve.
Okay, I love this. We started with a seed, and now we're talking about the structure of history.
That's Hegel for you.
Okay, now let's talk about another big concept for Hegel.
All right, yeah.
What's he talking about when he's talking about reason?
So Hegel saw reason as this powerful force that challenges our assumptions and helps us move beyond our limited perspectives.
But isn't reason supposed to be like logical and objective?
Well, Hegel didn't see reason as like fixed or absolute. For him, reason is constantly evolving. It's a process of critical thinking that kind of pushes us to question like existing norms and strive for this more comprehensive understanding of ourselves and the world.
So it's not just about following rules or logic, but about being willing to challenge those rules and constantly refine our understanding.
Exactly. Think about it like this. Every time you have like a good debate, you're engaging in this Hegelian process of reason. You're testing ideas, confronting different perspectives, and hopefully arriving at a richer understanding.
So reason in the Hegelian sense is about actively engaging with ideas and being open to changing our minds.
Precisely. And he believed that by embracing this process of reason, we could move closer to absolute knowing.
Okay, now we're getting into the really big stuff. So, what is absolute knowing? Is it like having all the answers?
Not quite. Absolute knowing, for Hegel, is more about understanding how we come to know anything at all. It's about recognizing the limitations of our own perspective and embracing the ongoing journey of learning and self-discovery.
That sounds like a lifelong pursuit. Okay. So how does this relate to our everyday lives?
Well, think about any time you've had a deeply held belief challenged. Maybe you encounter a new piece of information, or you have a conversation with someone who has a totally different perspective. Or you go through some life-changing experience that forces you to reevaluate your worldview.
Okay.
Those moments when our assumptions are shaken and we're forced to grapple with new ideas, that's the Hegelian process of reason, kind of leading us toward absolute knowing.
It's like those aha moments when you suddenly realize there's so much more to learn and understand.
Exactly. And Hegel believed that by embracing those moments of discomfort, by constantly challenging our own assumptions, we can move closer to this more complete understanding of ourselves and, the world around us.
Okay, that's a pretty inspiring way to think about learning.
Yeah.
I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and explore a different perspective on the evolution of human consciousness.
Okay.
And this comes from Julian Jaynes' theory of the bicameral mind. And this is where things get really intriguing.
Yeah, this is a fun one.
Yeah. So James proposed this pretty radical idea that early humans didn't experience consciousness the way we do today. They lacked this sense of an inner self and were guided by auditory hallucinations that they perceived as like divine command.
So, they weren't having conversations with themselves in their heads, like we do now.
Not in the same way.
No. Wow.
Yeah, so imagine a world where people didn't have that internal monologue, that sense of introspection. Instead, their thoughts and impulses would be experienced as like voices from outside themselves.
So they'd basically hear a god telling them what to do instead of thinking it through on their own.
Exactly. Yeah. And James argued that this bicameral mind was actually quite functional for like early societies. So, imagine a group of hunters facing like a dangerous predator. Instead of each individual having to think through the situation and come up with a plan, they would hear the voice of their leader or a god instructing them what to do. And it allowed for like quick, coordinated action in situations where hesitation could be deadly.
That makes sense from like a survival perspective. But what happened? Why don't we experience consciousness that way anymore?
That's the big question. So James believed that, around 3,000 years ago, this bicameral mind began to break down and individual consciousness as we know it emerged. And this wasn't like a sudden thing. It was driven by a lot of factors. Things like the rise of complex societies, the development of writing, the increasing need for like individual decision making.
So the world was getting more complicated and people needed more nuance in their decision making.
Yeah, they needed to be able to think for themselves more. And as that inner voice, that sense of self developed, those like divine voices began to fade.
Imagine what a profound shift that must have been. It's like losing your internal compass.
Yeah, it's like, how do you even orient yourself in the world without that?
That must have been terrifying. So what did people do?
Well, James argues that we sought to fill that void, that lack of that external voice, with new forms of storytelling, myth-making, and religious beliefs. It's as though we needed to create external systems of meaning and authority to replace the internal guidance that we had lost.
So instead of hearing the voice of God directly, they started writing down sacred texts and building temples.
Exactly. So those external structures kind of helped us to cope with the loss of those inner voices and provided a new framework for understanding the world.
I mean, this is all very theoretical, but it's pretty mind-blowing to think about,
It's kind of hard to imagine, isn't it? That our ancestors experienced consciousness so differently.
Right. A whole world guided not by reflection, but by command.
And then we dreamed.
We dreamed of the hunt, of the stars, of the spirits in the trees. We painted on cave walls not to survive, but to remember, to feel, to become something more.
That gives me chills.
Yeah, it was the beginning of something else, something inward. And those echoes still live in us today.
Yeah, so do you think there are any like remnants of the bicameral mind present in us today?
That's an interesting question. Have you ever had like a sudden urge to do something, like a gut feeling that seemed to come out of nowhere?
Sure.
Perhaps those are echoes of those ancient voices, whispers from our evolutionary past.
Okay, now I have to ask you, do you ever experience anything like that? Do you ever feel like you hear voices telling you what to do?
I think I'll just say that I try to listen to my own inner voice and make sure it's well informed before acting on any sudden urges.
That's probably a good approach. Okay, so let's move on to this big question of human nature, where things get even more complex. So we have these essentialist perspectives that argue that there are core unchanging traits that define what it means to be human. And then we have like dynamic evolutionary perspectives that emphasize how our understanding of human nature is constantly shifting alongside, our scientific knowledge and our cultural changes. So on the one hand, we have this idea that we're all born with certain inherent qualities. And on the other hand, we have the idea that we're constantly evolving and adapting to our environment.
Right.
It's a tricky one.
It is tricky. I mean, think about how much our understanding of genetics, neuroscience, human behavior has changed just in the last century.
Absolutely.
What we consider essential about human nature today might look very different a century from now.
You're right.
It makes you wonder how much of who we are is predetermined and how much is shaped by our experiences. And that kind of brings us to this really fascinating concept of shared narratives. And this is something that Yuval Noah Harari explored in his book, Sapiens. You know, Harari argues that stories, whether they're about gods, nations, money, or even scientific theories, have played a huge role in shaping human society.
They really have.
So these shared stories, these narratives, they help us make sense of the world and coordinate our actions.
Right.
But as Harari points out, shared narratives can also be these incredibly powerful tools for manipulation and control.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Think about how propaganda, advertising, political rhetoric all rely on shaping our narratives to influence our behavior.
Yeah, it's really about framing, right? Framing a story.
These narratives, these shared stories can be a force for good or bad, depending on how they're used.
Exactly. It's like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, shared narratives have allowed us to achieve incredible things as a species. I mean, we've built pyramids, we landed on the moon, but they've also been used to justify war and oppression and environmental destruction.
Yeah, that's a sobering thought.
It is.
It makes you wonder about the stories that we're telling ourselves right now, especially when it comes to global challenges like climate change.
Yeah. What are the dominant narratives that are shaping our response to that? It's a crucial question because the stories we choose to believe in, the narratives we embrace about our relationship with the planet and with each other will ultimately shape the future of humanity.
This is all giving me a lot to think about. So we've covered Hegel's ideas about knowledge and consciousness, James's theory about like the evolution of the mind, and now this concept of shared narratives. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think let's delve deeper into those shared narratives and see how they connect to the themes of interconnectedness and collective responsibility that we talked about at the beginning. And maybe, along the way, we can start to envision what kind of stories we need to be telling ourselves if we want to create a more sustainable and enlightened future.
That sounds like a good plan. All right.
Let's do it.
So we've been talking about these big, powerful ideas, guys, the bicameral mind, shared narratives, and I'm starting to see how they all kind of point to this idea of interconnectedness. So it makes me wonder, if we're so interconnected, what does that mean for our sense of responsibility?
Yeah, that's the crux of it, isn't it? The narratives that we choose to believe in, the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are and where we're going, they have a real impact on the world that we create. And that impact, extends far beyond our individual lives.
That actually reminds me of the example from Sapiens about the impact of Homo sapiens on ecosystems.
Oh, yeah.
It was pretty sobering to read. The arrival of humans in a new environment often led to the extinction of megafauna,
Yeah.
like these giant sloths and woolly mammoths.
It is a stark reminder that our actions, even those that seem small or insignificant at the time, they can have ripple effects across time and space. We're not just responsible for our own little corner of the world. We're all part of a complex web of cause and effect.
So if we acknowledge this interconnectedness, how does that change how we approach these global challenges?
Well, for starters, I think it shifts our focus from individual responsibility to collective responsibility.
Okay.
Instead of asking, what can I do to make a difference? We start asking, what can we do together?
That seems like a much more powerful approach, but it also kind of feels daunting. To be honest, where do we even begin to tackle these issues that are so big and complex?
Well, I think a good starting point is to recognize that many of the challenges that we face are actually a consequence of our success as a species. Homo sapiens has become so dominant, so adept at manipulating the environment, that we've inadvertently created a whole new set of problems.
It's almost like we've become too good at being human, at least in the way that we've traditionally defined human.
Yeah.
In the way that we've been operating.
So what do we do about that?
Well, we need to find new ways to leverage our ingenuity, our creativity, our capacity for cooperation. Instead of using our intelligence to dominate and exploit, we need to use it to find solutions that benefit all of humanity and the planet as a whole.
That sounds great in theory, but how do we actually shift from this mindset of individual gain to a more collective approach?
Well, it starts with changing the stories that we tell ourselves.
So it's about shifting from a narrative of me to a narrative of we.
Yeah.
But how do we actually make that happen?
Instead of narratives of competition and scarcity, we need narratives of cooperation and abundance. Instead of focusing on what divides us, we need to focus on what unites us.
Okay.
It requires us to be more conscious of the narratives that we're consuming and creating. What messages are we absorbing from the media, from our social circles, from our political leaders? Are those narratives reinforcing a sense of separation and fear? Or are they promoting understanding and empathy?
So we need to be more critical of the information that we're taking in and more intentional about the stories that we're choosing to share.
Exactly. And we also need to actively seek out narratives that inspire us, that offer a vision of a future where humanity thrives in harmony with nature and with each other.
Do you have any examples of those kinds of narratives? Like what stories are giving you hope these days?
Well, personally, I find a lot of inspiration in the work of people who are kind of bridging the gap between science and spirituality. People who are exploring the interconnectedness of all things. There's a growing movement of thinkers and artists and activists who are kind of whizzing together ancient wisdom traditions with modern scientific insights to create this new narrative for humanity.
That sounds really fascinating. Can you give us some specific examples?
Sure.
Think about the work of people like Fritjof Capra, who explores the parallels between modern physics and Eastern mysticism, or Joanna Macy, who combines Buddhist teachings with ecological activism. These individuals are offering a new way of understanding our place in the universe, a way of seeing ourselves as part of a larger interconnected whole.
So it's not just about changing our minds, right? It's about changing our hearts as well.
Exactly. We need to cultivate a sense of awe and wonder, a deep appreciation for the interconnectedness of all life, and we need to translate that understanding into action.
That makes a lot of sense, but I think a lot of people feel really overwhelmed by the scale of the challenges that we face.
I get that.
It's easy to get stuck in this cycle of despair and inaction.
Yeah.
So how do we move beyond that?
Well, it's true. The problems can seem insurmountable.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that we're not starting from scratch. Throughout history, humans have faced seemingly impossible challenges and found ways to overcome them. We have this incredible capacity for innovation, for resilience, for collective action.
So we need to tap into that collective power, that sense of shared purpose. How do we do that?
Well, one way is to focus on the solutions that are already emerging. There are countless individuals and organizations around the world working on innovative approaches to climate change, to social justice, to sustainable development. We need to amplify their voices, support their efforts, and create a sense of momentum that inspires others to get involved.
So it's about highlighting the positive, the things that are working, and building on those successes.
Exactly. And it's also about recognizing that we don't have all the answers. We need to be willing to experiment, to learn from our mistakes, and to adapt our approaches as we go.
That sounds like a much more hopeful and empowering way to approach these challenges than just focusing on the doom and gloom.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance between acknowledging the urgency of the situation and cultivating a sense of optimism and possibility.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of shifting our narratives, of focusing on collective action, of highlighting solutions. But I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, this idea that the challenges we face are in some ways a consequence of our success as a species. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. Think about it.
Our intelligence, our creativity, our ability to adapt and innovate. These are the very qualities that have allowed Homo sapiens to thrive and spread across the globe. Yet these same qualities have also led us to create systems and technologies that now threaten the delicate balance of the planet. It's a paradoxical situation.
It is, yeah. So it's not about rejecting those qualities, but about finding a way to use them more wisely, more ethically.
Precisely.
And that's where this conversation about human nature becomes so crucial. If we believe that humans are inherently selfish, greedy, and destructive, then it's hard to imagine a future where we can overcome these challenges.
But if we acknowledge that our nature is more complex, that we also have the capacity for empathy and altruism and cooperation, then perhaps there's hope.
We need to rewrite the story of human nature, not just the story of humanity.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we rewrite the story of human nature?
Well, one way is to broaden our understanding of what it means to be human. For too long, our perspective has been shaped by a narrow, Western-centric worldview. But if we look to indigenous cultures, to ancient wisdom traditions, to the countless ways that humans have lived and thrived in harmony with nature, we might discover a richer, more hopeful understanding of our potential.
So it's about recognizing that there are other ways of being in the world, other ways of relating to each other and to the planet.
Exactly.
And by exploring these different perspectives, we can begin to imagine new possibilities, new ways of living that are more sustainable, more just, and ultimately more fulfilling.
That reminds me of something I read about the capabilities approach to human development. Instead of just focusing on economic growth or material wealth, it emphasizes what people are able to do and to be.
That's a powerful insight. If we want to create a truly sustainable and enlightened future, we need to move beyond those narrow definitions of progress and success. We need to ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want to live in? What kind of human beings do we want to be?
And those questions bring us right back to the power of narratives.
They do.
Think about it. Every great civilization, every movement, every breakthrough started with a story, a vision, a shared belief in what was possible. The stories we choose to believe in will ultimately shape the world that we create. If we want to build a better future, we need to tell better stories. And the question is, what stories are we telling ourselves now? Are they stories of division and fear? Or stories of unity, progress, and hope? What if we changed the story? What if we dared to imagine a different future? History has shown this time and again. The Renaissance, the Civil Rights Movement, the Space Age. They all began with a shift in narrative, a story that challenged the status quo.
And those stories, as we've seen, need to acknowledge our interconnectedness, our shared responsibility, and the complex, ever-evolving nature of what it means to be human.
You're really blowing my mind here.
We've talked a lot about rewriting the story of humanity, finding new narratives that inspire us to act collectively and create this more sustainable future.
It's almost overwhelming to think about, all the possibilities and the potential consequences.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's like we need these frameworks to help us navigate the future.
It's true. I mean, we're entering uncharted territory here, but I think it's precisely because of these challenges that the ideas we've been discussing, interconnectedness, responsibility, the power of narratives, they become even more crucial.
It makes me wonder what Hegel or James would make of all of this. They were writing in such different contexts, but their ideas about consciousness and reason, they seem incredibly relevant now.
Totally. I think they'd be fascinated by these developments. Hegel's emphasis on the ongoing struggle for self-knowledge, his belief that reason is constantly challenging and transforming our understanding of the world.
In James's theory of the bicameral mind, this idea that our ancestors experienced thoughts as these external voices, right? It makes you think about the rise of artificial intelligence.
Oh, for sure. It's a thought-provoking parallel. Are we creating new forms of divine voices with these powerful AI systems? Will we once again outsource our decision-making and moral reasoning to these external entities? And so what will that mean for individual consciousness and autonomy?
Those are some big questions, but I think it's important to remember that even as we explore these radical possibilities, we still have the power to choose the kind of future that we want to create.
Absolutely. These technological advancements, these potential transformations, they're not going to happen in a vacuum. They'll be shaped by the decisions we make, the values we prioritize, and yes, the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are and where we're going.
So in a way, we're all participating in writing this new chapter, whether we're conscious of it or not.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Every choice we make, every action we take, it contributes to the unfolding narrative of humanity.
That's a powerful thought, and a hopeful one, I think. It means that we're not just passive bystanders in this grand evolutionary drama. We have agency. We have the power to shape the future, not just for ourselves, but for, generations to come.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this Lantern's Glow. We've journeyed through Hegel's philosophy. We explored Jane's intriguing theory of the mind. We grappled with the complexities of human nature.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
It has. And throughout it all, we've seen how these ideas converge on this crucial theme of collective responsibility. In a world facing unprecedented challenges, from climate change to social inequality to technological disruption, we need to move beyond individualistic perspectives and embrace this more interconnected, collaborative approach to problem solving.
It's really the only way forward.
Yeah, it's been an incredible conversation. So, before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder, right? We've talked a lot about rewriting the story of humanity. But as we move forward, as we face these complex challenges and incredible opportunities, the most important question we can ask ourselves is this: what kind of story will you choose to be a part of?
That's a great question to end on. This journey through humanity's past and future really emphasizes one thing: our capacity to evolve, not just biologically, but in our understanding, our empathy, and our responsibility to each other and the planet.
And the beauty of it all is that this evolution is ongoing. Each of us has our role to play in shaping the narrative and contributing to the story of humanity's progress, connection, and survival.
So, as we step into this uncertain but exciting future, let's remember the power of our choices and the stories we tell ourselves. Let's make them count.
Absolutely. Together, we're writing history, and the pen is in our hands.
Let's ensure that the legacy we leave is one of wisdom, kindness, and collective progress. All is one.
The story of humanity is unfinished. It's up to us to decide how the next chapter unfolds, and the future is ours to shape. All is one.
Thank you for journeying with us through this exploration of human consciousness, from our first questions to the myths and symbols that shaped who we are. Now the conversation is yours. What story are you living? And how will it ripple forward into the future? If today's ideas sparked something in you, share your reflections in the comments. We read them all, and your voice adds to the tapestry we're weaving here together. If you'd like to help this space grow, consider subscribing and sharing this with someone who loves exploring life's big questions. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and remember, all is one.